All right, good day. Hope that you're doing well. So in this video, we're going to be doing translations as well as reflections, right? Now, before we can go about answering these questions relating to them, first I want to explain the concepts that you need to know whenever you have a translation question, as well as the concepts that you need to apply whenever you have reflection questions. And now let me start off with translations. Now, remember your coordinates are always in a form of X and Y. Now, your X value is going to be affected by your left and right movement. So if your graph is shifted to the left or right, this is going to affect your X value, right? And as a result, if it's shifted to the right, you're going to add to your X value. And if it's shifted to the left, you're going to subtract on your X value, right? Now, what about your Y value? Your Y value, it will be affected by your up and down movement, right? So this is affected by your up and down movement. Now, if your graph is shifted up, you're going to add to your Y value. If your graph is shifted down, you're going to subtract to your Y value. Now, let me make an example. Let's say our coordinates are for A, right? It's 2 and minus 3. And our graph is shifted 3 units to the left and 2 units up. Now, if it's to the left, it's going to affect your X value. And what do we do on your X value? We subtract. So basically, the new X value, it will be 2 minus 3, which will be, so our new A is going to be minus 1. And your new Y value, because of the up movement, right? Remember, if it's up, we add. And here we're going to say minus 3 plus 2, meaning that our new Y value is going to be also at minus 1. So these are the concepts you need to go about applying whenever you have translation questions, right? Y. Remember, your X is affected by your left and right movement, and your Y is affected by your up and down movement. Now, what about reflections? Now, there are three types of reflections that you need to go about knowing. First, it's your reflection about the x-axis. Now, let's take this red as this red triangle, right? This is our initial shape, ABC. Now, what do we mean when we say we reflected this about the x-axis? It means that we flip this over our x-axis line, which is this line. Right? This shape was flipped over this x-axis line. Now, as a result, I want you to note something. What happened to your x values? Your x values remain the same, right? Why? Remember, you look at your B, it still has the same x value. Look at your C, it still has the same x value. Now, your A, its x value, it was at 0. Same applies here, still at 0. So your x value won't be affected if you reflect your graph upon the x-axis. Now, what would be affected is your y value. Look at your red shape. Initially, it was on the positive side. Remember, above your x-axis, this portion, right, your y values are positive. Now, when you reflect it about the x-axis line, and you see that now the y values of your shape are going to be negative. Right? So as a result, what can we conclude about reflection about the x-axis? Reflection about the x-axis, whenever a graph is reflected about the x-axis, what you need to go about doing always, you need to multiply your y value. Right? This is for reflection about the x-axis. You need to multiply your y value by -1. Always, right? So remember, our coordinates are in a form of x and y. So this is the y value I'm referring to. You need to multiply it by -1, right? For example, let's say our a coordinate is 2 and minus 3. And if this graph is reflected about the x-axis, this is going to affect your y value. And what do we do on this y value? We multiply it by -1. As a result, your new coordinates at a are going to be at 2 and positive 3. This is what I mean when I say your y value, you need to multiply it by -1. So always reflection about the x-axis, your y value would be affected. Now, on your reflection about the y-axis, right, your x value is the one that is going to be affected. Now, this red is our initial shape, right? There's triangle here. This is the shape we have initially. Let me just leave it like that. Now, when we reflect it about the y-axis, we're going to flip it over this y-axis line. So as a result, it's going to be on the other side. As you could see, this is indicated in blue. Now, I want you to note something. Your y values are not going to be affected. They're still going to be the same. Your y value at C is still the same. At B, same applies to A. What is affected is your x values. Can you see that before your x values were negatives? Now, when you flip it over to the other side, your y value is going to become a positive. So reflection about your y-axis, it affects your x values. And as a result, you need to always multiply those x values, your x values, by -1. every time whenever your graph is reflected about your y-axis, right? Making an example again, let's say our coordinates at 8, -2, and -3. And if our graph is reflected about the y-axis, we know that the x value is going to be affected. And what do we need to do to this x value? We need to multiply it by -1. And if we do so, our new coordinates at a is going to be +2, and your y is still going to remain as -3, right? Now let us look into the last translation you need to know, which is translation about the y is equals to x line. Now, your y is equals to x line is this line indicated in red. When we reflect about this y is equals to x line, basically we're flipping this shape over this line. Let's say initially our shape is here, and when we flip it over this line, this is going to be our new shape. Now, in terms of coordinates, what is it that you need to do whenever your graph is reflected or your shape is reflected about the y is equals to x? Now, remember your coordinates are in a form of x and y. So this is one of the easiest reflection questions you could get. In this scenario, what you would need to do, you would need to swap your values of x and y, right? What do I mean by that? Let's say your coordinates at A, they are at 3 and -4. And if your graph is going to be reflected about the y is equals to x, you're going to swap these values. So basically your new A, your x is now going to become your -4, and your y is going to become 3. You're just going to swap your x and y values, right? Now, let us look into these questions that we are given. Now, draw the image of ABCDF, basically the shape, if it's translated 5 units to the left and 6 units upwards on the same Cartesian plane. Now, we need to apply the very same principles that we learned about. So first, I'm going to try and identify the coordinates of these original shape, right? So doing that on the side, I have A up until F. And remember, your coordinates are in a form of x and y always. Now, let me start off with my A, right? My A, its x is at 2, and its y is at -2. So the coordinates of my A initially is 2 and -2. So first identify your coordinates of your original. Now my B, its x is also at 2 and its y is at -5. Now about my C, the y value for, or my x value for my C is at 4 and the y is at -5. So 4. Now for my D, my x value is at 4 and my y is at -4. For my E, my x value is at 3 and my y value is at -4. And lastly, for my F, my X value is at 3 and my Y is at -2, right? So let me just try and clear that out so that this could be neat. Now, this side, I'm going to write down my new coordinates, my new E, my new F. Now, remember, here they said it was translated 5 units to the left. Left and right, they affect your value of x, and to the left, you need to subtract. So we need to subtract 5 on our value of x and 6 units upwards. Upwards is going to affect your y, and because it's up, we're going to add 6 on our value of y. Now, let us do this for each and every value. Now, let us start off with our a. Now, remember, we need to subtract 5. So 2 minus 5, this is going to become -3, your new x value. And then for your y value, -2 added to 6, this is going to become +4. Now for your b, right, your x is 2, and then if you minus 5, this is going to be -3. And your y is -5. If you add 6, this is going to be at 1. For your c value, your x is 4, and if you minus 5, your new x coordinate is going to be -1. And your y value is -5. If you add the 6, this is going to become +1. Now for your d, if you minus 5 on your value of x, which is 4, this is going to become -1. And if you add 6 on your y value, which is -4, this is going to become +2. And for your e, your x value is 3. If you minus 5 on 3, your new x value is going to become -2. And your y value is -4. And if you add 6, this is going to become +2. And lastly, for your f, your x is 3. If you minus 5 on that x value, you're going to get -2. And your y value is -2. If you add 6, your new y value is going to become +4. So these are my new coordinates. Now the last step, after I found my new coordinates, I can go and plot this on my Cartesian plane. So I'm going to plot these points. Starting off with A, my x is at -3, here's my -3, and my y is at 4. Now, if these two were to meet, my point A would be here. So this is my A point, right? Let me also try and erase those dotted lines so that this could be neat. Now, we're going to do the same for the others, right? Your B, its x is at -3 also, and the y is at 1. So this is where my B would be situated. Now, for your C, the x is at -1, and the y is at 1. So this would be your point C. Now, for your D, your x is -1, which is here, and your y is at 2. So this would be your point D. And for point E, it's -2, here's -2, and your y is at 2. So this is 1, this is 2, so this would be my point E. And lastly, my point F is at -2 and 4, right? This is my -2 and my 4 is here, meaning that my F would be here. Now, lastly, join your points, right? So I'm going to join A and B. I'm going to join B to C. I'm going to join C to D. I'm going to join E to D, E to F, and lastly, these 2 points. Now, can you see that this is still the same shape? Because it has different coordinates, it's going to be in a different position on your Cartesian plane, right? And this would be your new shape, right? If this original is translated 5 units to the left as well as 6 units upwards. Now, let's move on to the last question. Now, the vertices of triangle XYZ are given as follows. We're given A, B, as well as C, the coordinates. Now, write down the new coordinates of B after its reflection about the y-axis. Now, I want you to take a pause and try to attempt this question, right? Remember, whenever you're reflecting about your y-axis, what is it that is affected? What's going to be affected is your x value, right? And what do we do on this x value? We multiply it by -1. So our original B coordinates are -2 and 3. And I'm saying that your x value is going to be affected and we need to multiply it by -1, right? So -2, if you multiply it by -1, this is going to become +2. So your new coordinates at B, if your triangle is reflected about the y-axis, it's going to become +2 and your 3 would change. It will still remain the same. And this would be your new coordinates. And that will be all for this question. Remember, if ever you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. Thanks.